Okay, everybody, so let's recap this lesson today. So what we talked about today is really angles in the unit circle. Okay, so within the circle, we have reference angles. So if you look at the unit circle, it's really made up of all these angles. But if we need angles that create right triangles, because we want to use right triangle trig in our unit circle, then we got these things called reference angles. So a reference angle, it's an acute right triangle on the x-axis. So if I were to draw 150 degrees, then I also can draw a triangle, and the triangle, the right triangle here, is called the reference angle. So 150 degrees, this angle here would have to be 100, this angle here would have to be 30 degrees because it makes the 180. So my reference angle is 30 degrees. So it turns out that some of the sine, cosine, tangents is going to be the same for the 150 as the 30. Okay, 200 degrees, the reference angle, if I draw my right triangle, is going to end up being a 20 degree angle because of 180 plus 20. So it turns out the tangent of 200 and the tangent of 20 happen to be the same value, okay? Just like the sine of 150 and the sine of 30 is the same thing. We'll talk about that more. If I need a 150 degree angle, that would be like right here, its reference angle has to be a positive. So my reference angle is here, it's the positive 50 degrees, okay? So, get out your unit circle, okay? Well, we want two answers because we're taking the whole entire unit circle. So we want answers between 0 and 360 degrees. So we're looking for an angle with a y value of 1/2. Well, okay, well, there, 30 degrees, and right there. So we get two answers. So sine of 30 and sine of 150 both give us 1/2. So we get two angles. We're going to take both. Okay. Now, if it's not on the unit circle, we know there's two answers. So I used a calculator. I went sine inverse of 0.8, and I got 53 degrees. But the other angle we know is its reference angle. So we take 180 degrees and minus 53.1. We get both angles. So we have an angle of 53.1 and 126.9. Okay. Cosine of 0.7. Now that's not on the unit circle either. So we know if we go cosine inverse of 0.7, we get an angle 45.6, right? And it turns out that there's a reference angle, the same x value. So we take 360 degrees and spin it around. Our reference angle would be 314. So cosine of 45.6 and cosine of 314.4 will both give us 0.7. Now, what I did is I copied off a chart for you. And the chart helps us with the reference angle. So cosine of an angle, cosine inverse, we get an angle. To get its reference angle, subtract 360 degrees or 2 pi. If it's tangent, we get the angle by the inverse, and then its reference angle is either going to be the angle plus 180 or, of course, plus 180. If it's degrees, it gives us a second angle. Sine inverse, we get the first angle by taking the inverse, and then our second angle is going to be pi minus that or 180 minus theta. Tangent, if it's negative, we'll talk about that. So let's see how this chart works. So I did tangent of 1.5, I did the inverse tangent, and I got 53. Then I go, okay, what do I do? So I use my chart. I did the inverse tangent, I got theta 1. So then theta 2 is just take that angle and add 180 degrees to it. That's what I did. Two angles. Sine a negative. Well, when I did the negative inverse of this, I wound up with a negative angle. And I can't have a negative angle because of the domain. So I first added 360 to it to get us an angle of 306 degrees. Now it's got another angle down in the quadrant. So I use my reference angle chart. It says if you got sine of a negative number, first thing I do is I add 2 pi to it, or in our case we added 360 degrees to it. But then when you find the reference angle, you're going to take pi, or 180, plus the absolute value of that negative angle. So what I did is I took then 180 plus the absolute value of 53, so it's really 180 plus 53 gives me my other angle, okay? Tangent, negative, same thing. I took the inverse of tangent. I got a negative angle. Can't have a negative angle because it's supposed to be between 0 and 360. So I first subtracted or added 360 to that negative angle. Now it has to have another angle, another reference angle. So I look at my chart. I found the first angle. And then I take the negative angle plus 180 or pi. So then I added 180 to that. I get 129. So I get both these angles will give me a tangent of negative 1.2, okay? So then I did the same thing, but using radians. I changed my mode in my calculator, and I went through the exact same process, except for my answers are going to be in terms of radians. I went to my calculator, changed my mode into radians, and I did my calculator. And then I used my reference angles to get those, okay? Okay, on the back side, we talked about cofunctions. So cosecant is not in your calculator, but sine is 1 over sine. So cosecant is 1 over sine. So then I flipped it and made it sine equals 1 over 2.1. I did the sine inverse of that, and I got my first angle, okay? I'm back into degrees, by the way. Then I did my reference angle, 180 minus that. I got 151.6, okay? We did not do these because I didn't think we need to, okay? D, same thing. I solved first, minus 5 divided by 4. There is no secant on your calculator, but there's a cosine. Made it 1 over cosine, okay? And then I ended up flipping it. I did the inverse of 4 over negative 5, and I got an angle of 143. The reference angle says subtract 360, so I got 216.9, okay? Example 4, I solved again. I plus 3. I did sine inverse, but now I'm in radian mode, so I changed my calculator. Got my first answer. I looked at my reference angle chart, right? It's right there. And I subtracted pi from it, and I got 2.26. So that's all I have. Went through it kind of quickly, but if you have any questions, come see me, okay?